with an in-depth view on how the market's trading and all of those big stories is Sasha Narishkin, Director at Vestac. See the Caxton share price down 14% today, up 25% on Friday. So some people took a punt on this whole Element One story.
Yeah, obviously, it's not a very liquid share for obvious reasons that there are big gorilla shareholders out there. So, obviously the stock around is, people are punting it on the way up and then obviously a little bit disappointed. I think this is actually a good outcome because you get passive shareholders, people who are not really interested in the business, and they got them through legacy holdings in Johnny Communications. Is that right? Is that how it all came up?
I think Johncom had owned Element One, where it had about just over 39% of Caxton, and then it unbundled that. It wasn't big enough to trade on the JSE anymore, so it went over the counter. So it's not easy to trade over the counter, as we well know.
No, it's not. So I think this is probably a good outcome for minority shareholders inside of Caxton. But I think there's something bigger here at play, which we discussed off air, and that's perhaps, as you mentioned, maybe the Johan Rupert looking for more media stakes, and maybe with the ETV stake from HCI going into Cerdal, maybe those two businesses getting together.
Of course, he did. I wrote a column on the subject about 3 months ago, which he refuted, and in private SMSs and emails to me said, "We are not in the TV business." Well, it'll be interesting to see if that's still the case in 6 months' time.
Well, remember that Remgro generate an enormous amount of cash, so need to find a home for them. So if you're having a look at what are essentially viewed by equity investors as legacy assets, maybe you're getting them on the cheap as we're transferring to a more digital age. So we've gone from an age where newspapers were at the forefront of your delivery of news to TV to the internet now. Maybe you're able to pick up what are essentially viewed as legacy assets, but they're not going to be legacy assets in the future because newspapers might be a thing of the past for us in terms of consumption, but journalism is certainly more available to everyone through different dissemination methods.
It is interesting, and the opportunities there to put together another serious media group to compete with Naspers, because Naspers is really what a gorilla, 400 billion market cap. The next biggest is Caxton at 11.
And much, much bigger than Times Media Group. Who would have thought if we had back 10 years, who would have thought that was going to be the way that it had rolled out? I think the more, the better for ultimately the consumer of media. That's you and I, because we get a better, more balanced view, ultimately.
Would you buy the stock, though, Caxton, on this?
Yeah, I struggle to see the value, and also the liquidity part is key for us. If there is no liquidity and you're getting these wild movements, it's a bit of a problem to hold them in portfolios. But maybe we can discuss when you get to the MTN Zakele thing. Buffett always says you should be willing to hold something if the market closed for 5 years tomorrow.
And it has in this case.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that really is a disappointment. 120,000 shareholders. There was a big program to get them interested in buying, in rather trading the stock when it was supposed to start last Monday. It hasn't, they didn't get an opportunity really to trade. For a little bit on Monday, a little bit on Tuesday, closed. It was supposed to start again today. Now we hear it's not starting, and it'll only perhaps get an announcement on Thursday and when it will start. It's bad preparation.
It is, and as you pointed out, there is someone who does this successfully already, is that Equity Express crowd. And a friend of mine is a programming agent for them and said, well, it reflects poorly on his business, and they were even fielding calls too as to how come you can't help us.
Well, that was my mistake, because I was asking the chairman, so you're going to go and do this on Equity Express? I'd been to see the guys a bit before. They just done their 1 billion trade. It was a new company to me and looked like they had a pretty organized operation. And he said, no, well, only subsequent to the interview did he say, no, it isn't Equity Express. And the more I dug into who these people are, the more concerned you get, because they haven't done anything like this before. And here we see the consequence.
Well, maybe there's a gap for the JSE, which, as you point out, we always love to beat up on. But if they're down for 10 or 15 minutes, everyone throws their hands up. And as you said, this is down for a few days. Or maybe we're all too hyperactive, and maybe we should go back to that Buffett idea.
But you can't blame these poor guys. I mean, they've waited 3 years to trade their stocks. When they do get a chance, it bombs out.
Doesn't work.
But the other big story, of course, this morning's one with Brian Joffe launching his bid. What do you make of that for Adcock Ingram?
Yeah, so I think, we're not shareholders of Adcock, so, I can't even put on a shareholders cap and say, well, what should we think? But let's for a minute presume we were shareholders and put that cap on and say, how would you view, A, the PIC's reaction to this? They would be a lot more favorable to this, and effectively they'd be able to block it from a minority's point of view if they got 26%. Is that right? So that would be interesting. If I was a shareholder, I would say, okay, well, the business hasn't exactly performed really well. Maybe if I tender a few of my shares for cash, extract a little bit of cash at the higher value, and then remain committed to Bidvest being able to, rather than maybe, and let's be fair, because the South American Chilean is an unknown quantity to South African investors. Even in a digital age, when you can read their annual report in English, you can have a look at the business. It is relatively expensive. So maybe if there was a scrip option, you'd say, well, I don't really want CFR shares, I want cash. And remember that there probably are a lot of tired old people who got it in the Tiger unbundling. That's why the PIC at like 12.5% is the biggest shareholder.
I think it's 18.
Is it as much as 18? But maybe it was through Tiger. There are not a lot of other strong shareholders in there. So maybe Bidvest is about to change that all up.
Yeah, well, you take the PIC and Bidvest today saying it's got 4%, and Bidvest also saying that it's going to challenge the CFR deal in the courts. And we know how long that can take. So if you've got an option of going onto the stock market today, getting just over 70 Rand a share for Adcock Ingram, why sell to Bidvest at 70 Rand? That doesn't seem to make sense. Somebody must think that there might be a count of it.
Yeah, well, the share price is trading slightly above that, and of course it's time value of money. So I guess the market is thinking that they'll come back maybe with a Rand or two more after the dust has settled, if people choose to go the Bidvest option. But there might be some people who are tired shareholders and tender their whole portion and just say this is a great exit opportunity without too much of a cost, of course, because there's that cost involved too. And let's go look for other opportunities. And if ultimately Bidvest does get that stake, there are a lot of institutional asset managers that are shareholders of Bidvest.
Yeah, it's an interesting business. But I guess if you've had a good ride, as many people have with Adcock over the last 6 months, well,
maybe it is an opportunity.
Not a bad time to cash in your chips, no doubt. And the bad news today was Net One, the old
so it was that constitutional court
taking a hammering.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think it's cut and dried. Again, I mean, if you look at the double, the buyers and sellers, you could always drive a whole fleet of double-decker buses between that. Completely illiquid. And this is just quite a big blow after the share price had had a big run up to, I don't know, somewhere near 120. And where did it close on Friday? Something like 75?
65 today, 65 down another 9 Rand. Yeah.
Wow. So it's almost halved in not even a full trading session, because I think at lunchtime before the news broke, there was somewhere around 120 Rand a share on Friday.
Sasha Nariskin is with Vestact, and after the